They mocked him on live TV. He responded with a lawsuit that revealed the shocking truth behind the scene. The night began like any other for the millions of viewers who tuned into their favorite late-night comedy show. The familiar intro music played. The host stepped onto the stage with his trademark swagger and the crowd erupted in cheers. It was business as usual: sharp political jabs, cultural commentary, and a sprinkle of self-deprecating humor. But as the night progressed, something felt different. Toward the middle of the show, the host leaned against his desk smirking at the camera, and now he announced, "Let's talk about the quiet Trump." A photo of 18-year-old Barron Trump flashed onto the screen. The audience chuckled, unsure of where this was going. The host began with light banter, joking about Barron's height and his aloof demeanor, but within moments the tone shifted. The jokes became personal, dissecting his appearance, mannerisms, and private life. The crowd's laughter wavered, some shifting uncomfortably in their seats for a brief second. Even the host hesitated, as if realizing he might be crossing a line, but instead of pulling back, he doubled down. The punchline landed harshly, eliciting gasps instead of laughter. At home in Florida, Barron was scrolling through his phone when clips of the segment started popping up on social media. His initial reaction was disbelief. Watching it again, he felt a lump form in his throat. The laughter, the cruel commentary, it all felt like a spotlight shining directly on his most vulnerable insecurities. It wasn't just teasing, it felt calculated, mean-spirited. The reaction online was swift. Hashtags like #HatTooFar and #DefendBarron began trending. Critics and supporters of the show clashed in heated debates, with some defending the segment as just comedy and others condemning it as outright bullying. Media outlets picked up the story within hours, replaying the clip repeatedly as commentators weighed in for Barron, who had spent much of his life shielded from the public eye. This was uncharted territory. He'd grown up watching his family navigate scandals and controversies, but he had always been the quiet one, the one who stayed in the background. Now the spotlight was on him, and he wasn't sure how to handle it. His family was quick to rally around him. Melania Trump, fiercely protective of her son, was the first to speak out. "My son is not a public figure," she said in a statement. "Children should be off limits no matter who their parents are." The comment drew praise from supporters and even some critics, but it did little to quell the growing firestorm. Barron spent the next few days avoiding the news, hoping the attention would die down, but it didn't. The clip continued to circulate, the laughter haunting him in every replay. He began to wonder if this was just the way things worked, if being ridiculed was an inevitable consequence of his family name. But something about the situation didn't sit right with him. This wasn't just a passing joke or a momentary lapse in judgment. It was an intentional decision to mock an 18-year-old who had done nothing to warrant the scrutiny. And the more Barron thought about it, the more he realized he couldn't let it go. He replayed the segment one last time, watching every smirk and every word. Then he turned off his phone and sat in silence. The thought weighed heavily on him: if I don't stand up for myself, who will? But standing up meant stepping into a world he'd avoided for years, a world of scrutiny, controversy, and relentless judgment. Was he ready for what was to come? Barron's mind was a whirlwind. In the days following the late-night show's controversial segment, he couldn't escape the constant buzz, headlines dissecting the jokes, viral social media posts debating his reaction, and even unsolicited advice from strangers. Yet amid all the noise, he remained silent. It wasn't that he didn't have things to say, he just wasn't sure anyone would care to listen. The Trump family's mansion in Palm Beach was unusually tense. Discussions swirled among advisors and legal experts, each with their own opinion on how to handle the situation. Some believed ignoring the controversy was the best strategy, while others argued for a public rebuttal. "This will pass," Barron, an older family friend, said over coffee one morning. "These things always do, don't give it more attention." But Barron wasn't convinced. Sitting at the edge of the family's sprawling terrace overlooking the ocean, he replayed the events in his mind. The laughter from the audience felt louder with every memory, echoing like a taunt. It wasn't just about the embarrassment he'd grown up learning to handle: whispers and stares. This felt deeper, more malicious. The turning point came during a quiet moment with his mother. Melania, always poised and measured, she had been his unwavering pillar throughout the ordeal. She found him alone in the study, staring blankly at his laptop. Without saying a word, she placed her hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to fight This battle, she said softly, but if you choose to, you won't fight it alone. Her words lingered in Barron's mind. For the first time he realized the weight of his own decision. This wasn't just about defending himself, it was about setting a precedent. If he let this slide, it would send a message that public figures, even those as young as him, were fair game for ridicule. And what about others who faced bullying without the platform to speak out? That night, after hours of contemplation, Barron walked into the dining room where his father's longtime attorney was seated. The man had an imposing presence, his silver hair slicked back and his briefcase neatly placed by his side. He looked up as Barron entered, raising an eyebrow in curiosity. "I've made my decision," Barron said, his voice steady despite the weight of his words. "I want to file a lawsuit." The attorney leaned back in his chair, studying the young man in front of him. "You understand what this means, don't you? This won't just be about the jokes. The media will pick you apart. They'll dig into your life, your history, everything. Are you ready for that?" "I've thought about it," Barron replied, meeting his gaze, "and I know it won't be easy, but this isn't just about me. It's about showing people that there's a line and that crossing it has consequences." The attorney nodded, a faint smile breaking his otherwise stoic expression. "All right," he said, "then let's make them understand." The lawsuit was filed within days, and news of Barron's decision spread like wildfire. Media outlets pounced on the story, analyzing every detail of the case and speculating on the outcome. The lawsuit wasn't just a legal battle, it was a cultural flashpoint. Some hailed Barron as a symbol of standing up to bullying, while others dismissed him as overly sensitive, accusing the Trump family of weaponizing the courts. But for Barron, the opinions didn't matter anymore. He had made his choice and there was no turning back. But as the lawsuit gained traction, the question loomed: would this fight bring the justice Barron sought, or would it only deepen the spotlight he'd worked so hard to avoid? The news of Barron Trump filing a lawsuit against the network landed like a bombshell. Within hours it became the top story on every major news outlet. Headlines ranged from supportive to scathing. "Barron Trump fights back, a bold stand or a fragile ego?" And late-night comedy under fire. "When is it too far?" Social media became a war zone with hashtags like #StandWithBarron and #satire, his free speech battling for dominance. The public's response was deeply divided. On one side were those who praised Barron for standing up for himself, calling the lawsuit a necessary step in holding powerful media figures accountable. "This isn't about politics," one viral tweet read, "it's about basic decency, leave kids out of it." Others, however, saw the lawsuit as an overreaction, accusing the Trump family of exploiting the situation for attention. "Comedy is comedy," a popular pundit argued during a cable news segment. "If we start censoring jokes, where does it end?" The network itself initially tried to downplay the controversy. A spokesperson released a carefully crafted statement emphasizing their commitment to free speech and humor while expressing vague regret over any offense caused. But the damage control wasn't enough. Critics pointed out that the apology stopped short of addressing the real issue: the targeting of an 18-year-old who had deliberately avoided the public eye. The host, meanwhile, remained silent. Known for his biting humor and unapologetic style, he became the center of the storm. Speculation about his reaction swirled, with rumors of heated arguments behind the scenes and tension between him and the network's executives. When he finally broke his silence during an episode of the show, his tone was far from conciliatory. "I make jokes," he said, leaning into the camera with his signature smirk. "Some people can take them and some people can't." The audience laughed, but the moment felt uncomfortable, even forced. Online the clip was dissected endlessly, with many calling it a non-apology. As the lawsuit gained momentum, the story began to take on a life of its own. Legal analysts weighed in, debating whether Barron's case had merit. Some argued that satire was protected under the First Amendment and that the lawsuit would ultimately fail. Others pointed to the leaked emails from the show's producers, which suggested a deliberate effort to provoke as a potential game changer. Amid the chaos, Barron remained largely out of sight. He avoided interviews, choosing instead to let his legal team handle the public narrative. But the pressure weighed heavily on him. Friends who once called to check in grew distant, unsure of how to navigate his sudden notoriety. Strangers approached him in public, either offering words of encouragement or hurling insults. Still, Barron refused to back down. "This isn't about winning or losing," he confided to his lawyer during a late-night meeting. "It's about making sure people know this kind of behavior isn't okay. The network, however, wasn't about to fold easily. Their lawyers mounted an aggressive defense, framing the lawsuit as an attack on freedom of speech. They painted Barron as overly sensitive, someone who couldn't handle the harmless ribbing that came with being part of a high-profile family. But the leaked emails from the show's producers revealed during the early stages of the case told a different story. Words like "make it sting" and "push the envelope" painted a picture of deliberate malice, and the public began to shift. Even some of the show's most loyal fans found themselves questioning the ethics of targeting a teenager. But as the lines between comedy, cruelty and accountability blurred, the world waited to see whether the courtroom would deliver justice or merely more spectacle. While the world speculated on the lawsuit's outcome, Barron's legal team worked tirelessly behind closed doors. The office of his lead attorney became a war room, walls lined with documents, timelines and charts mapping out every angle of the case. It wasn't just about winning, it was about building an airtight argument that would stand up to the network's powerful defense team. The emails from the show's producers were a goldmine of evidence. What initially seemed like a few careless remarks revealed something much darker. Upon closer inspection, the tone of the correspondence was unapologetically aggressive, with phrases like "he's an easy target" and "let's push the line and see what happens." One email even hinted at how the backlash could boost ratings, describing the controversy as a PR win waiting to happen. When Barron's attorney shared these findings with him, the young man's expression hardened. "They didn't just make a mistake," he said. "They planned this. They knew exactly what they were doing." The legal team decided to file a motion to include the emails as key evidence in the trial. The network's lawyers immediately moved to block their admission, arguing that the emails were taken out of context and did not represent the intent of the segment. But the judge ruled in favor of Barron, allowing the emails to become part of the case. The decision sent shockwaves through the entertainment world. News of the emails leaked to the press, igniting a new wave of outrage. Public opinion began to shift further in Barron's favor. Even those who had initially dismissed the lawsuit as frivolous found it hard to defend the producers' actions. The network faced growing pressure not just from the public but also from its advertisers. Brands began pulling sponsorships from the show, unwilling to associate themselves with the controversy. Inside the network, chaos reigned. Producers and executives held emergency meetings trying to contain the fallout. Fingers were pointed, blame was deflected, and morale plummeted. The show's host, once untouchable, became a liability. Despite his defiant public persona, insiders revealed that he was increasingly isolated both professionally and personally. The host finally addressed the controversy during an episode of his show, but the response fell flat. His tone was defensive, his jokes forced. "We live in strange times," he said, gesturing toward the camera. "When comedians are put on trial for doing their job." The audience laughed, but it felt hollow, a pale echo of the raucous energy the show once commanded. Meanwhile, Barron remained focused. His days were consumed by depositions, strategy meetings and media updates, but the weight of the case took its toll. He spent long hours in solitude, grappling with the enormity of what he had said in motion. Late at night, he often found himself scrolling through messages from strangers, some supportive, others vitriolic. One message, however, stood out. It was from a mother in Kansas who thanked him for his courage. Her teenage son had been relentlessly bullied at school, and she saw Barron's fight as a beacon of hope. "You're showing him that he doesn't have to stay silent," the message read. Barron saved it, returning to it whenever doubt crept in. Despite the mounting stress, Barron refused to waver. He saw the case not just as a fight for himself but as a broader stand against a culture that often prioritized shock value over human decency. But with the trial looming, the stakes grew higher and the question hung heavy in the air. Could Barron's evidence be enough to hold the network accountable, or would the weight of their influence crush his resolve? The day of the trial was unlike anything Barron had ever experienced. Crowds of reporters and spectators lined the courthouse steps in Miami, microphones and cameras trained on every door. The buzzing energy was almost suffocating, and Barron felt it with every step as he walked into the building alongside his legal team. Dressed in a tailored navy suit, he tried to channel The calm demeanor his father was famous for, but his clenched fists betrayed his nerves. Inside the courtroom was a theater of tension. Every seat was filled, legal analysts, journalists, supporters and skeptics, all eager to witness the showdown. Barron sat quietly at the plaintiff's table, his gaze fixed on the polished wood of the desk in front of him. Across the room the network's high-powered legal team appeared, relaxed, exchanging casual whispers as if this were just another day in court. The host, notably absent, became a point of contention in the media. Almost immediately the opening arguments set the tone. The network's lawyers framed the case as an attack on free speech, describing their client as a comedian exercising his constitutional rights. Satire has always been a cornerstone of our democracy, the lead attorney proclaimed, his voice booming through the courtroom. To restrict it is to risk losing one of our most powerful tools for holding the powerful accountable. But Barron's team countered with precision. This isn't about satire, his lawyer said firmly. This is about a calculated decision to target a young man who had done nothing to invite such ridicule. It's about intent, and the evidence will show that this was not a harmless joke. It was a deliberate act designed to humiliate. The tension in the room was palpable as the trial progressed. The highlight of the proceedings came when the infamous emails from the producers were presented as evidence. The words "push the line" and "let's make it sting" were projected onto a large screen for everyone to see. Gasps rippled through the courtroom and the jury's expressions shifted from neutral to uneasy. The defense scrambled to downplay the emails, arguing that they were taken out of context. The nature of comedy is to provoke, their lawyer insisted. These discussions were part of the creative process, not an attack plan. But the prosecution's next witness drove the point home, a former producer for the show who had left under murky circumstances was called to testify. She was nervous, fidgeting with her hands as she took the stand, but her voice grew steadier as she recounted her experience. "We knew it was risky," she admitted. "There were concerns raised about targeting Barron Trump, especially since he wasn't a public figure in his own right, but those concerns were dismissed. The higher UPS wanted something that would go viral. That was the goal." Her testimony hit like a thunderclap. Even the defense team seemed momentarily stunned. The courtroom buzzed as the implications sank in. This wasn't just poor judgment, it was a calculated decision driven by ratings and shock value. Barron's moment came when he was called to the stand. The courtroom fell silent as he walked to the witness stand, his tall frame seeming even more imposing under the weight of the moment. He took a deep breath, his hands gripping the edges of the stand. The questions were pointed. "Why did you decide to pursue this lawsuit?" the prosecutor asked. Barron hesitated, his voice steady but filled with emotion when he finally spoke. "Because this isn't just about me, it's about drawing a line. If someone like me, someone with resources, a family that supports me, can be treated like this, what does that mean for everyone else, for kids in school or people without a voice? This isn't about jokes, it's about basic respect." His words hung in the air, resonating deeply with the jury and the audience. Even the network's lawyers seemed unsure how to respond as the trial continued. The courtroom drama reached a fever pitch. The defense brought their own witnesses, including industry experts who testified about the importance of satire in comedy. But the damage was done. The emails, the producer's testimony, and Barron's heartfelt words had left a lasting impression. But with closing arguments approaching, the final question remained: would the jury side with Barron's fight for accountability, or would the network's defense of free speech prevail? The jury deliberation felt like an eternity. Each minute stretched, the tension inside and outside the courtroom mounting. Barron sat quietly at the plaintiff's table, trying to stay composed, though his foot tapped restlessly beneath the desk. His mother, seated behind him, placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. It was a small gesture, but it reminded him that he wasn't alone in this. Finally, after nearly 7 hours, the jury filed back into the courtroom. The atmosphere was electric, every movement amplified in the silence. The four-person rose, holding the slip of paper that would decide the outcome of one of the most publicized trials in recent history. "We find in favor of the plaintiff," she announced, her voice steady and clear. A wave of emotion swept through the room. Barron exhaled a breath. He hadn't realized he was holding. His lawyers exchanged subtle nods, their hard work and meticulous strategy having paid off. Behind him, his mother squeezed his shoulder gently. The network's legal team, on the other hand, sat in stunned Silence. Their confident facade shattered. The court awarded significant damages to Barron not just for defamation but also for emotional distress. It wasn't about the money though. For Barron the victory was symbolic. It sent a message that even those in the media spotlight deserved basic human decency. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed as Barron stepped into the midday sun. Cameras flashed, microphones jostled for position, and questions flew from every direction. Barron's attorney addressed the press, first highlighting the importance of the case and what it meant for accountability in media. Then, to everyone's surprise, Barron himself stepped forward. This case was never about silencing anyone, he began, his voice calm but resolute. It's about accountability. We all have a responsibility to think about the impact of our words, especially when those words have the power to hurt. I hope this reminds everyone that respect should never be optional. The statement was brief but it carried weight. Social media exploded with reactions, many praising Barron's courage and maturity. The phrase "respect is never optional" quickly became a trending hashtag, with users from all walks of life sharing their own stories of bullying and mistreatment. The network, meanwhile, was reeling. The trial had exposed the darker side of its operations, and the leaked emails became a focal point of criticism. Advertisers pulled their sponsorships and the show's ratings plummeted under mounting pressure. The host issued a second, more heartfelt apology during a broadcast. "I crossed a line," he admitted, his voice heavy with regret, "and I've learned from this." To Barron Trump: "I'm truly sorry." For Barron, the apology felt too little too late, but it wasn't about him anymore, it was about the precedent the case had set. The network announced sweeping changes to its policies, implementing stricter guidelines for its content and creating oversight committees to ensure future accountability. In the weeks following the verdict, Barron stepped back from the spotlight, choosing to focus on his personal life, but he didn't let the experience fade into the background. He began working quietly with anti-bullying organizations, using his platform to advocate for others who didn't have the resources or visibility to fight back. Letters poured in from strangers across the country, parents thanking him for standing up, teens sharing their own experiences with bullying, and even former critics admitting they had changed their perspective. One letter from a teacher in rural Montana stood out to him: "Your courage gave my students a lesson no textbook ever could." It read, "Thank you for reminding us all that even small voices can make a big difference." The lawsuit's ripple effects extended far beyond Barron's personal victory. It reignited conversations about the responsibilities of media and the power dynamics between public figures and those who wield influence over them. More importantly, it reminded people of the value of empathy, even in a world that often seems to thrive on conflict. But for Barron, the greatest victory wasn't the courtroom decision or the public recognition, it was the realization that he could make a difference, not by following someone else's path but by standing firm on his own. Barron's journey wasn't just a headline-grabbing lawsuit, it was a defining moment that transcended his personal battle. For many, it became a symbol of resilience, proof that even the quietest voices could demand to be heard. The case had brought him into a spotlight he had long avoided, but instead of shrinking from it, he stood tall, turning the attention into a platform for change. In the weeks and months following the verdict, the impact of the case continued to resonate. Schools held discussions about cyberbullying and the consequences of words. Inspired by Barron's decision to take a stand, anti-bullying organizations reported a surge in donations, with many crediting the high-profile case for drawing attention to their work. Conversations that had once seemed theoretical about the line between free speech and accountability became personal and urgent for millions of people. For Barron, life slowly returned to a new kind of normal. He enrolled in college, focusing on his studies while quietly continuing his advocacy. He kept a folder of letters and emails from people who had reached out to thank him, a reminder of the lives he had touched. Every now and then he would reread a few, grounding himself in the purpose behind his fight. But the lessons of his experience extended far beyond the courtroom. He had learned that standing up for oneself wasn't just about protecting personal dignity, it was about setting an example for others. In taking on a media giant, he had shown that no one, no matter how powerful, was above accountability, and in the process he had redefined what it meant to be a Trump, not through controversy or conflict but through compassion and strength. The moral of the story was clear: words matter, they have The power to hurt, to heal, to divide and to bring people together. And while freedom of speech is a cornerstone of society, it comes with an equally important responsibility to use that freedom wisely and with empathy. As Barron reflected on his journey, one thought remained constant: the importance of taking a stand even when the odds seem insurmountable. It's not about the size of the fight, he once said in an interview, it's about the reason behind it. If you're standing up for what's right, you've already won. So to those watching, the challenge is clear. What will you stand for? Will you use your voice to make the world a kinder, more compassionate place? Whether it's speaking out against injustice or offering support to someone who needs it, every action matters. If Barron's story has inspired you, let it be a call to action. Share this video, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to this channel for more stories that remind us of the strength and courage within us all, because the fight for dignity and respect isn't just Barron's fight, it belongs to all of us. Together we can ensure that the world becomes a place where kindness and accountability are never optional.